All right. Hey, folks. Welcome into the News 12 Now desk. Thanks for joining us here on this Wednesday, June the 14th, right at 8 o'clock here on our Wednesday. We've got a special interview this morning here. Joining us from Washington is WRDW Washington correspondent Peter Zampa, and we're talking about a very historic thing that's been happening here. If you've been following along with the news, you know former President Donald Trump has been indicted and arraigned 37 charges related to the documents at his Mar-a-Lago estate. So, Peter, thanks for joining us this morning.
Yeah, of course, Nick. Happy to do it.
Absolutely. So we heard from the former president last night after his arraignment. He went back to his golf club in New Jersey and talked to supporters there. What did he say? What was his message to those supporters?
Yeah, Nick, it was a whole lot of red meat for his base. He started out by saying it's the most evil and heinous abuse of power in United States history. He started going after Jack Smith, the special counsel in this case, who brought this indictment, the 49-page indictment, to his doorstep. He also went after Jack Smith's wife, saying that she's part of this Democrat-led attempt to try to get rid of Donald Trump politically in 2024 so that it's easier for Joe Biden. And that's another narrative I want to talk about here, Nick, is that Trump and his supporters that you hear from are trying to make it sound like Joe Biden arrested Donald Trump. That's the connection they're hoping that the American people can make so that it looks more politically motivated, so that it looks like political use of the Department of Justice. He continued to maintain his innocence during this speech, citing the Presidential Records Act, saying he has every legal right to have these documents that he had. So a lot of the same talking points we've been hearing about for the past couple months, frankly, we heard last night from Donald Trump after his federal arrest.
Yeah, and it feels like every time more charges get brought against him or another controversy comes up, people on both sides kind of perk their ears up. Supporters of his saying this is kind of a witch hunt like he's been talking about. Opponents of his are saying, you know, he's not fit to run the country because of these charges. So what are these both sides of the aisle saying after this arrest?
Well, we can look to Capitol Hill specifically for his supporters. Kevin McCarthy dodging questions about this indictment, dodging questions about his arrest yesterday, but trying to flip the tables, trying to say, look, we need to start looking into the Biden administration. We need to look at Joe Biden's handling of documents or his business dealings abroad. We need to make sure that there is equal application of the law across the country. You have J.D. Vance, a senator from Ohio, pledging that he's going to block all Department of Justice nominees in the U.S. Senate until he says Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, stops harassing Joe Biden's political opponents. So you have that kind of support. Opponents are saying, look, this is a day of reckoning. This is something that's been coming. If half of this indictment is true, he needs to be convicted and he needs to be serve prison time because they say he can't flout the law. That's the big line that you hear from his political opponents and from a lot of people, that no one is above the law in this country. The law needs to be applied equally, and that includes Donald Trump.
Yeah, and when the indictments came down, the big date that we all marked on the calendar was yesterday, the arraignment. That was kind of the next big step in this thing. So now that this is behind us, what's next? What are we looking forward to in the next part of this trial?
Yeah, Nick, well, first of all, I should say this case is now in the hands of Judge Eileen Cannon. And that's someone who's been involved in this case before, actually. She tried to stop federal investigators from doing their job and going to Mar-a-Lago and getting some of these documents. She was eventually overruled, but she is known in this case, and she's also known to Donald Trump because Donald Trump nominated her in 2020. So she's a Trump appointee handling this case. So that's a friendly bit of news for Donald Trump. However, legal experts I speak to say before we even get to the trial part, we're going to have a big pre-trial process. The legal team for Donald Trump is going to be filing a bunch of motions, including a motion to dismiss this case, unlikely to go through, but also motions pertaining to what testimony can be heard. Can his attorneys that are cited in this indictment actually give testimony, or is it protected under attorney-client privilege? The classified information in this case, how are we going to handle that in a court of law when so many people don't have security clearances? Can that be used in this case? So all of these legal questions we're going to have, and it could take months and months to do this. And I should say another point, the Trump team may be thinking, hey, look, we can drag this out to 2025. Maybe a Republican's in the White House. Maybe we can get this case thrown out altogether. It's a long shot to drag it out that long, but we will see.
Yeah, and you mentioned they can file a motion to dismiss this case. Likely not going to happen, so we should see a trial in this. So what defenses will Trump's legal team try to put out there, do you think?
Well, first of all, I mentioned earlier the Presidential Records Act. That's something that's you hear a lot from supporters of Donald Trump, that he has every right to have this classified information. However, this indictment, now these are allegations, we should say that, but in this indictment there is a dialogue between Donald Trump and his staffer, allegedly saying to this staffer, you know, if I was president, I could declassify this, but now that I'm not, I can't. So that is Donald Trump, in his own words, allegedly saying he understanding that he no longer had the right to declassify some of this information. It's written right there in this indictment. So the Presidential Records Act may not protect him there. But, you know, from a legal expert I speak to, they say, look, if they can try to poke holes in certain arguments or certain charges, maybe that can convince the jury that the momentum is going toward the Trump team, and that other parts of this indictment are not found to be true. But this lawyer put it to me best. He said, look, when you're weak on the facts, you pound the law. When you're weak on the law, you pound the facts. Or when you're weak on both, you pound the table. And he says this is that kind of situation for Donald Trump because of just how much evidence appears to be laid out in this indictment. Again, all allegations, and according to Jack Smith, innocent until proven guilty. Now federal prosecutors have to try to prove that this indictment is a set of facts.
Yeah, and kind of like you said, hinting earlier, William Barr said if just half of what he's being accused of is true, he is in trouble. So, Peter, we appreciate the time this morning, joining us live there from Miami outside the courthouse. Thank you for the insight, and I'm sure we'll continue to follow up on this as we start to learn more and this process continues to get going.